Reciprocity. An unsolicited gift or favor often creates an uncomfortable, almost unspoken obligation to return something of greater value. This feeling is deeply wired into us, a fundamental component of human social exchange, making us feel indebted even when no explicit agreement has been made. It's a powerful, often subconscious, driver of behavior, rooted in our evolutionary need for cooperation and mutual support. A classic 1970 psychologist, Dennis Reagan, vividly demonstrated this principle. Participants were asked to rate art alongside a Confederate, someone secretly working with the experimenter. In one condition, the Confederate would leave the room during a break and return with 2 Cokes, offering one to the participant with a casual, "I bought one for you." Crucially, this was presented as a spontaneous, no-strings-attached gesture. Later, after the art rating task was complete, the Confederate asked the participant to buy raffle tickets for a car, explaining he was trying to win a prize. The results were striking. Participants who had received the free Coke bought twice as many tickets compared to a control group who received no drink, purchasing an average of 2 tickets versus 1. This held true even if they openly admitted to disliking the Confederate, illustrating the raw power of the reciprocity norm overriding personal feelings. You've probably felt this pull yourself. Perhaps after accepting a free sample at a grocery store, receiving unexpected address labels in the mail from a charity, or even a complimentary appetizer at a restaurant. That small, unexpected kindness creates a psychological debt, and our brains push us to settle it, often with something of greater perceived value. The caveat here is that the gift or favor must truly feel unsolicited and genuine. If it's perceived as a transparent bribe, a calculated manipulation, or a demand for immediate reciprocation, the effect often vanishes and can even backfire, leading to resentment rather than compliance. Commitment and consistency. Once people make a small agreement or take a public stance, they feel a powerful internal and external pressure to stay consistent with that stated position, making larger aligned agreements much harder to refuse. It's a profound human drive to appear and to be internally coherent and reliable to others. This psychological phenomenon, often linked to cognitive dissonance, means we strive to align our future actions with our past commitments, especially if those commitments are public. This was famously demonstrated in a seminal 1966 study by social psychologists Jonathan Friedman and Scott Fraser. They approached residents in a California neighborhood, asking them to place a small 3-inch sticker in their window supporting safe driving. This was a trivial, easy-to-agree-to request. 2 weeks later, a different researcher representing a different organization approached the same residents, asking if they would display a large, ugly "Drive Carefully" sign in their front yard. An astounding 76% of those who had previously agreed to the small sticker also agreed to display the giant, unsightly sign. In stark contrast, only 17% of a control group who were asked to display the large sign outright without any prior small commitment agreed. This principle explains why online surveys often begin with trivial yes questions to get you started, or why signing a petition might later lead to a donation request from the same cause. We don't like to contradict ourselves, especially when we've already taken a public stance or committed to a particular identity, such as being a safe driver or a supporter of a cause. The consistency bias means that our initial small commitment sets a precedent, making it psychologically difficult to refuse subsequent larger requests that align with that initial stance. Social proof. When we're uncertain about how to act, what to believe, or what choice to make, we often look to the behavior of others to guide our own. This powerful buying signal, the idea that if others are doing it, it must be right, is an incredibly potent commercial and social lever. It functions as a mental shortcut, assuming that the collective wisdom of the crowd is a reliable indicator of correctness, especially in ambiguous situations. Think of a restaurant with a line out the door. Our immediate assumption is that the food must be excellent, even if we've never tried it. Or consider a nightclub where the promoter deliberately makes the entrance look busy, creating a perception of high demand and desirability. Online, you see this constantly and explicitly. E-commerce sites proclaiming 5,000 people bought this. 37 people are viewing this product right now, or prominently displayed 5-star review counts and testimonials. In the late 1980s, psychologist Robert Cialdini conducted a field study in hotels to apply social proof, finding that guests were significantly more likely to reuse towels when a sign indicated that the majority of guests who stayed in this room reused their towels compared to a standard environmental appeal. The specific wording in this room made the social proof even more localized and effective. The caveat is that social proof can backfire if the behavior being modeled is undesirable or if the proof is perceived as fabricated. For instance, studies have shown that signs highlighting how many people aren't recycling or how widespread a particular negative behavior is, e.g., many people litter, can actually increase littering because it normalizes the undesirable behavior rather than discouraging it, inadvertently sending the message that everyone else is doing it. Authority. Compliance with a request rises sharply when it comes from a perceived authority figure, even if that authority is purely cosmetic or symbolic. We are deeply conditioned from childhood to respect and obey those in positions of power, expertise, or apparent knowledge, viewing them as credible sources of information and guidance. This conditioning is ingrained through institutions like family, school, and government. A classic demonstration was a 1974 study by Leonard Bickman conducted in the streets of Brooklyn. Researchers, dressed either in a security guard uniform, a milkman uniform, or regular street clothes, approached passers-by and made various requests to pick up a paper bag, give a dime for a parking meter, or stand on the other side of a bus stop sign. The results were stark. Participants obeyed the security guard 76% of the time, compared to only 48% for the milkman and a mere 30% for the civilian in street clothes. The uniform alone, without any actual power, was enough to dramatically alter behavior. This is precisely why doctors wear white coats, why legal documents use dense, impenetrable jargon and are stamped with official seals, or why a fancy job title on a business card like Senior Vice President or Chief Strategist can instantly shift your perception and increase your deference. It's unsettling how easily a uniform, a title, or even an air of confidence can change how we behave, influencing our willingness to comply, even when there's no real power dynamic or genuine expertise at play to justify such obedience. Liking. We are far more likely to agree to requests, be persuaded by arguments, and purchase product from people we know and like. This principle extends beyond just friendship to include people we perceive as similar to us, familiar, attractive, or those who offer us genuine compliments. Salespeople are masters of finding common ground, a shared hometown, a favorite sports team, a similar hobby, or even mirroring body language, because research consistently shows that even trivial similarities increase rapport and influence. A 1988 study by Frank and Gilovich found that people were significantly more likely to comply with requests from others who shared their birthday, highlighting the subtle but powerful impact of even an arbitrary connection. Consider the enduring success of the Tupperware party model, where you're buying from a friend or neighbor, not a faceless corporation, leveraging existing social bonds. Or the salesperson who tells you that color really suits you, it brings out your eyes, before pitching a product, subtly building a connection. We want to believe we're rational decision makers, but a friendly face, a perceived shared connection, or a well-placed, sincere compliment can make us drop our guard almost instantly, making us more open to persuasion. The caveat is that the liking, especially compliments or perceived similarity, needs to feel genuine and authentic. Transparent flattery, obvious attempts at manipulation, or a forced connection can often be spotted, leading to suspicion and resentment, thereby eroding trust and backfiring on the persuader. Scarcity. The perceived value of an item or opportunity increases dramatically when its availability is limited or it is difficult to obtain. Our brains panic, often fearing loss more intensely than desiring gain, making scarce items seem inherently more desirable, regardless of their intrinsic quality or utility. This taps into our deep-seated loss aversion. Stephen Warshall's 1975 cookie jar experiment vividly illustrated this phenomenon. Participants were asked to rate the quality of chocolate chip cookies from a jar. In one condition, the jar initially contained 10 cookies. In another, the jar contained only 2 cookies. The identical cookies in the jar with only 2 were rated significantly higher for desirability, attractiveness, and even taste. Furthermore, when a jar initially containing 10 cookies was then reduced to 2, simulating sudden scarcity, those cookies were rated even higher than those that were always scarce, emphasizing the impact of losing availability. You see this principle everywhere in commerce. Limited edition products, only 3 left in stock. Alerts on e-commerce sites, deal ends in 24 hours. Countdown timers, or exclusive members-only access. The fear of missing out, or FOMO, is a powerful motivator driving impulsive purchases and quick decisions. However, if the scarcity is clearly manufactured, perceived as a trick, or constantly prolonged like a final sale that never actually ends, it can erode consumer trust and backfire, making the brand seem dishonest and manipulative rather than exclusive. Unity. This is the strongest and most recently added of Cialdini's principles, representing a deeper level of connection than mere liking or similarity. Unity is about shared identity, a profound sense of belonging to the same group, family, or tribe, creating a powerful we sensation. When we share a common identity with someone, we are far more inclined to be persuaded by them, to support their cause, and to act in ways that benefit our group. This principle is why appeals framed as "we are New Yorkers and we help each other" are significantly more effective than simply "help others," as the former taps into a specific, shared group identity. Think of appeals to support local businesses from a local chamber of commerce, which leverages community identity, or political campaigns emphasizing common values and shared heritage among a constituency. Cialdini's later research highlights how shared experiences, particularly enduring a difficult challenge together, can forge a deeper, more profound bond of unity than mere demographic similarities. This isn't just liking someone because they're similar. It's a fundamental recognition that we are one of us, and that sense of belonging creates a powerful, almost unquestioning drive to assist, agree with, and protect fellow group members. It taps into our tribal instincts, leading to a strong bias towards those within our perceived in-group and a corresponding willingness to act on their behalf. Foot in the door. This tactic leverages the principle of commitment and consistency by starting with a trivial, easily agreed-to request, then following up with a real, much larger request that is consistent with the initial agreement. It's a subtle, incremental trap, making you commit to a course of action before you even realize the full implications. The same 1966 Friedman and Fraser study, where residents first agreed to a small "drive carefully" sticker before being asked to display a large, ugly yard sign, serves as the classic example of this technique. The initial small act of agreeing to the sticker creates a subtle shift in self-perception. The person starts to see themselves as a helpful, civic-minded individual who supports safe driving. This newly formed self-image then creates internal pressure to maintain consistency, making it harder to refuse the larger, subsequent request because doing so would contradict their self-perception. Charities often employ this, asking for a signature on a petition first, then a small one-time donation, then a recurring monthly pledge. Online, free trials for software or services often lead to paid subscriptions, as users have already invested time and effort in learning the platform and integrating it into their routines, making the psychological cost of discontinuing and finding an alternative seem higher than simply paying for the service. The initial foot in the door primes the individual for larger commitments by subtly altering their self-identity and sense of obligation. Door in the face. This is the opposite strategy of foot in the door, but it's equally effective, leveraging the principles of reciprocity and perceptual contrast. It involves making an initial, deliberately outrageous or unreasonable request that is almost certain to be refused. Then, immediately after the refusal, the persuader follows up with the actual, much smaller and more reasonable request. The second request is often granted because it is perceived as a concession on the part of the persuader, activating the principle of reciprocity. The target feels obligated to reciprocate the persuader's apparent compromise. Robert Cialdini's 1975 study powerfully demonstrated this. He approached university students, first asking them to volunteer for 2 years at a juvenile detention center, a clearly unreasonable and time-consuming request which was, predictably, refused by virtually everyone. Immediately after the refusal, the students were then asked if they would chaperone a 2-hour zoo trip for juvenile delinquents. A remarkable 50% of students agreed to the zoo trip after refusing the larger request, compared to only 17% who agreed when only offered the zoo trip up front. Car dealerships often use this technique. They might start with a sky-high price for a vehicle or an absurdly low trade-in offer for your old car, then negotiate down to a price that's still favorable to them but seems like a much better deal to you due to the initial extreme anchor. The key is that the initial request must be large enough to be rejected, but not so absurd as to be unbelievable or insulting, and the second request must genuinely appear to be a significant concession, low-balling. This insidious persuasion tactic involves securing an agreement to a request at one set of attractive terms, then, after the target has committed, revealing the true, less favorable terms or adding hidden costs. The commitment has already formed in the individual's mind, making it psychologically difficult for the person to back out, even though the conditions have changed. This works because once we make a decision, we tend to generate additional reasons to support that decision, making it harder to reverse course when new, negative information emerges. A 1978 study by Cialdini and his colleagues illustrated this with university students. They asked students to participate in a psychology study that was scheduled for 7 a.m. Only 24% of students agreed to this unappealing time. In another experimental condition, students were asked if they would participate in a study without being told the time. After they agreed to participate, they were then informed that the study was scheduled for 7 a.m. This time, a staggering 56% of those who initially agreed still showed up for the early morning study, more than double the direct request. You frequently experience lowballing when purchasing a car. You agree on an attractive price with a salesperson, but then, after you've committed and started paperwork, the dealer adds unexpected prep fees, document costs, or pushes expensive optional add-ons like extended warranties. Or when booking a flight online, where the initial attractive price suddenly has unexpected baggage, seat selection, and booking fees added at checkout. You've already invested mental effort and vision to purchase, and the thought of reversing course feels like a loss, making you more likely to accept the less favorable terms. That's not all. This persuasive technique involves presenting an initial offer and then, before the target can respond or even fully process the offer, immediately adding extra items, bonuses, or making a price reduction to make the deal seem even better. Crucially, simply presenting the better bundled deal up front is often less effective than the "that's not all" sequence. The sudden addition of perceived value triggers the principle of reciprocity. It feels like the persuader is giving you something extra, a special favor or concession, which creates an obligation to accept. Psychologist Jerry Berger demonstrated this in a 1986 study involving a university bake sale. When offered a cupcake and 2 cookies for 75 cents as a single, upfront offer, 40% of customers made the purchase. But when the offer was presented sequentially, it's 75 cents, followed by a slight pause, and that's not all, you also get 2 cookies. Sales jumped dramatically to 73%. The "that's not all" phrase creates a perception of an improved deal, a surprise bonus, rather than just a bundled product. This is the core of virtually every late-night infomercial. But wait, there's more. If you order now, we'll double the offer and include a free cleaning kit. It tricks our minds into thinking we're getting an unexpected gift or a superior deal rather than simply a pre-planned product bundle, making the offer seem far more irresistible and creating a sense of urgency to accept the perceived generosity. Bait and switch. This is a highly deceptive and often unethical sales tactic where an advertiser offers a highly attractive product or service at an unusually low price, intending to lure customers into a store or onto a website. However, the advertised bait item is either genuinely unavailable, of extremely limited stock that quickly sells out, or turns out to be of surprisingly poor quality or lacking essential features. Once the customer arrives, having invested time and effort, they are then redirected by the salesperson to a different, usually more expensive, higher margin product or service. The tactic capitalizes on the customer's initial commitment to buying and their reluctance to leave empty-handed. This tactic is often considered unethical and can be illegal under consumer protection laws in the United States, such as the Federal Trade Commission Act, if the advert genuinely existed, was never intended for sale in significant quantities, or if the seller refuses to show or sell the advertised item. You might encounter this at an appliance store advertising a top-brand flat-screen TV at an impossibly low price, only to be told it just sold out or was a one-off display model. But we have this other, much better model for just a bit more. Car dealerships are notorious for advertising a stripped-down base model vehicle with minimal features and a low price to get you in the door, only to show you fully loaded, higher-priced versions on the lot, insisting the base model isn't practical or available. Artificial urgency. This tactic involves creating manufacturer deadlines, countdown timers, and limited-time-only offers to compress a consumer's deliberation time, preventing them from carefully comparing prices, considering alternatives, or reconsidering their purchase. The goal is to bypass rational thought and trigger a primal fear of missing out, FOMO, forcing a quick, impulsive decision. You see this constantly online, e-commerce sites proclaiming flash sale, 24 hours only. Booking websites warning price will increase in 30 minutes. Book now to lock in your rate, or travel sites showing only 2 seats left at this price for these dates. While not tied to one single foundational study, it powerfully leverages the principles of scarcity and loss aversion, creating a tangible sense of panic. Our brains are wired to react to perceived threats, and a ticking clock or dwindling stock can feel like a threat to a good deal or a desired item. It's a manufactured panic designed to shut down your careful, rational thinking and push you to act impulsively before the opportunity disappears. However, when overused, clearly fake, or consistently reset, e.g., the same 24-hour sale running for weeks, it can breed deep distrust and push customers away as they perceive the tactics as manipulative and dishonest, eroding long-term brand loyalty. The because effect. This fascinating phenomenon demonstrates that simply providing any reason for a request, even if the reason offers no new information or is entirely self-evident, significantly increases compliance for small requests. It highlights how our brains often operate on mental shortcuts, particularly when faced with minor decisions. Psychologist Ellen Langer conducted a famous 1978 study at a university library photocopier. She had a Confederate asked to cut in line using 3 different phrasings. When the request was, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine?" Only 60% of people complied. When the request added a genuine reason, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine because I'm in a rush?" When compliance jumped dramatically to 94%. The most startling part, when the request was, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine because I have to make copies?" An almost equally high 93% still complied. The reason, because I have to make copies, is obvious and adds no new information. That's why everyone is at a photocopier. Yet the mere presence of the word because was almost as effective as a genuine, informative reason. Our brains are wired to accept because as a justification, almost blindly, particularly for minor requests where we're not expending much cognitive effort to scrutinize the logic. It's a linguistic trigger that signals a reason is coming, and for small asks, our mental autopilot often accepts it without further evaluation. Loss framing. Identical outcomes can be framed in different ways, and how they are framed profoundly impacts our decisions and willingness to act. When an outcome is described as an avoided loss rather than an equivalent gain, it typically produces a much stronger, more urgent action. This powerful insight comes from Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky's foundational work on prospect theory in the late 1970s, which demonstrated that people are risk-averse when contemplating gains but risk-seeking when contemplating losses. Specifically, people are more willing to take risks to avoid a loss than they are to achieve an equivalent gain, and the psychological pain of losing something feels approximately twice as strong as the pleasure of gaining the exact same thing. In real-world applications, insurance companies often frame their pitches around protecting your family from financial ruin or avoiding the devastating costs of an accident, rather than simply gaining peace of mind. Security systems are sold on preventing the loss of your valuables or avoiding a break-in, not just the gain of safety. Health campaigns might focus on the risk of death if you don't quit smoking rather than the benefits of a longer life. This is why messaging focused on what you stand to lose by not acting is often far more persuasive and motivates greater action than messaging focused on what you stand to gain by acting. Our innate aversion to loss makes us highly susceptible to this framing, driving us to prevent negative outcomes with greater intensity than we pursue positive ones. Disrupt then reframe. This subtle yet effective persuasion tactic involves briefly confusing the target with a slightly odd, unexpected, or unusual element in the pitch, which momentarily interrupts their critical scrutiny and automatic processing. Immediately after this brief disruption, the persuader quickly rephrases the offer in a way that makes it seem more appealing, reasonable, or easier to understand. This short circuit in thinking creates a fleeting window of vulnerability, bypassing initial resistance. A 1999 study by Davis and Knowles vividly demonstrated this technique. Students were instructed to sell greeting cards door-to-door for a charity. When the cards were simply offered for $3, 35% of residents made a purchase. However, when the offer was presented as their $3, which is 300 pennies, that's a bargain. Sales jumped dramatically to 65%. The 300 pennies part is the disruption. It's an unusual, slightly jarring way to state a common price, causing a split-second pause and momentary confusion in the listener's mind. During this brief moment of cognitive disruption, their usual mental defenses and critical thinking are momentarily offline. Then, that's a bargain. Reframe lands with less resistance because the mental defenses haven't fully re-engaged. It's a tiny glitch in your mental autopilot, just enough to open the door for persuasion before you can fully engage your skepticism and rationally evaluate the offer. This technique works by creating a momentary cognitive overload, making the subsequent, simpler, and positively framed message more likely to be accepted. Subscribe to Impulse, and the next video is waiting for you on screen right now.